I want to give you a hypothetical scenario. This man right here is Peyton Manning, and I think he needs no introduction. The man is one of the greatest quarterbacks in the history of the NFL, is a two-time Super Bowl champion and a five-time MVP, and is a Pro Football Hall of Famer. I'd be here all day if I talked about just how good Peyton Manning was. So long story short, the man is third all-time in touchdown passes and passing yards, and has a legitimate claim to being the greatest quarterback in the history of the sport. However, while he was good at a lot of things, there was one thing that he was never good at. That thing was running the football. Peyton Manning was slow as molasses, and had 5 seasons where he finished the year with negative rushing yards. He had more seasons with negative rushing yards than he had seasons with 75 rushing yards or more. In fact, of the 312 players in the history of the Denver Broncos to run with the ball at least one time, Manning ranks 312th, running for negative 55 yards in his time with Denver, when no other player has fewer than negative 20 yards. This is all to say that Peyton Manning knew what kind of quarterback he was. He never felt comfortable running, and any time he took off, it was like watching a team pull the goalie in hockey with 5 minutes left, because you were wondering where they were going and what the heck they were doing. So now, I want you to imagine this hypothetical scenario that Peyton Manning gets injured in a game, and Manning's coach, whoever it is, probably tells the press that he was going to be running with the football next game, that he better know how to run with the football, and that he is practically worthless and useless if he can't run with the ball. And I don't mean this in a sarcastic or a joking manner, like a reporter asking what his expectations are for Manning this season, and he responds by saying that he expects him to do a spin move like Lamar Jackson. I mean that the coach genuinely says he's going to run the football, and we need him to do this, when Manning himself is adamantly saying, yeah, I'm not running with the football. That's not my style. That's never been my style. I'm not good at it. I'm not 100% healthy, and I'm just going to be throwing the ball back there. That would be a pretty bizarre controversy, right? There's such a thing as playing to your strengths, especially when the strengths are so blatantly obvious and the weaknesses are also so blatantly obvious. And this feels like one of those where you're looking at the coach like he has 5 heads and wondering what on earth he's thinking. Well, I bring that up because this man right here is Boston Patriots quarterback Babe Parilli. If you ask people who the greatest quarterback in the history of the Patriots is, everyone is going to say Tom Brady. And to that I say, they're 100% right. And anyone who doesn't say Brady is certifiably crazy and doesn't know ball and should probably be checked out immediately. But if you ask people who the second greatest quarterback in the history of the Patriots is, odds are you'll hear a lot of people say this man, alongside Steve Grogan and Drew Bledsoe. Babe Parilli was an incredible quarterback for the Patriots, as you're seeing right here and we'll see throughout this video. There's a reason that he's in the Patriots Hall of Fame and is regarded as one of the greatest quarterbacks in the history of the American Football League. The man made it to 3 All-Star games with the Patriots, led the league in passing touchdowns in 1964, led the league in passing yards in 1964, was named an AP First-Team All-Pro during the 1964 season, led the league in completion percentage amongst all qualified quarterbacks during the 1961 season, and made the Patriots one of the most consistent teams of the mid-1960s in the AFL, as they were consistently good with him under center. Despite not doing a ton in the NFL throughout the 1950s as the 4th overall pick at the 1952 NFL Draft, the AFL was a place where many quarterbacks who didn't necessarily succeed could thrive, like Len Dawson and George Blanda, and Babe Parilli was no exception to that. But for as great of a quarterback as Babe Parilli was, and trust me, he was great, if there was one thing he was not, it was a runner. Yet, prior to a 1963 game against the Oakland Raiders, head coach Mike Holloway, in no uncertain terms, publicly criticized his quarterback and said that he was going to be running with the football. The Patriots we're going to try fitting a square peg in a round hole. The reasoning behind it? Well, it's going to blow your mind. And how the game turns out? Well, that's a whole different issue. Because this is the story behind Babe Parilli, and what might just be, considering the circumstances, the dumbest quarterback controversy in the history of the Patriots franchise, and one of the dumbest quarterback controversies in the history of professional football. Make sure you hit that like button down below, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we post on the channel, because we post every single day on here about the weird and the wacky history of the NFL and the teams currently playing in the NFL with stories like this one that you might not have heard of before. So if you like that sort of stuff and you want to join this community, then this is definitely the place for you. Thanks in advance for liking and subscribing and for helping this community grow. And with that in mind, let's talk about Babe Parilli and his attempt to run away from running. Before I talk about the actual incident in question and just how insane it was, we need some context to understand how Babe Parilli's career was going and how this season was going. Not necessarily as a quarterback in the traditional sense of throwing the football, but as a runner. And you have to remember, before going any further, in the 1960s, quarterbacks were not expected to run with the ball. Today, every quarterback seems to have at least some mobility. The days of being a statue in the pocket and the days of not running with the football as a quarterback are long gone. The game has evolved tremendously. Guys like Joe Flacco, who have the grace of a wounded gazelle when they run, are a rare breed nowadays. While everyone can't obviously be like Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts when they run with the ball, today, every quarterback has at least some ability to step up in the pocket and take off. And every quarterback today has some confidence in turning up the field and running down the sideline. Back in the 1960s, that was a completely different era in more ways than one. During the 1962 season, there were 18 players in the 8-team AFL to average at least 20 rushing yards per game, or 5 rushing yards per quarter. That's not a lot, but there were 18 guys to do it. Not a single one of those players was a quarterback. For some perspective, in 2024, there were 13 quarterbacks to average at least 20 rushing yards a game, including guys like Drake May and Brock Purdy that you usually don't associate with their abilities to run with the ball. During the 1961 season, there were 21 players in the AFL to have at least 200 yards rushing. Of those 21 guys, only one of them, Al Darrow of the New York Titans, was a quarterback. And during the inaugural season of the league in 1960, of the 23 players to average at least 20 rushing yards per game, Al Darrow was the only quarterback listed. And keep in mind that Al Darrow was a literal track and field star at Michigan State who played a bit of defensive back too. So there was a giant asterisk next to that. Point is, quarterbacks were not expected to run with a football back in the 1960s. And when it came to the man you've been watching this entire time in Babe Parilli, he was no exception. Parilli was highly successful with the Patriots in 1961 and 1962. As the starting quarterback, the Patriots won 12 games and lost just 5 under his watch over those 2 seasons, as Parilli finished second in the league in passer rating in each of those 2 seasons, finishing behind Hall of Fame player George Blanda of the Houston Oilers in 1961 and Hall of Fame player Len Dawson of the Dallas Texans in 1962. And you know what Parilli didn't do during either of those 2 seasons to acquire that success? Run with the football. In 1961, Parilli had 183 rushing yards across 14 games, meaning that he averaged roughly 13 yards per game and was picking up just 2.7 yards per carry while doing so. And in 1962, Parilli had 169 rushing yards across 10 games, averaging less than 17 yards per game while having just 2.8 yards per carry. Running was only a necessity. It's not that he was necessarily scared of running, but rather, it was something that quarterbacks just didn't do back then. Over his final 2 starts of the 1962 season, the man had negative 13 yards rushing. During one particular outing in 1961 against the San Diego Chargers, where Parilli threw 15 passes, he did not run the ball once. And of his 4 rushing touchdowns during the 1961 season, 3 of them came from 1 yard out, which usually means that they came on a quarterback sneak. Despite getting drafted in 1952, the man had never had 200 yards rushing in a season, which seems like an incredibly easy feat to pull off if you're a starting quarterback and had even an ounce of mobility. For some perspective, Vinny Testaverde once had over 200 yards rushing in a season, and that man was definitely no spring chicken. I know that much. I think I've hammered home the point enough. Babe Parilli was a great thrower of the ball, but not a great runner of the ball. Nor did he have to be, because that was not his game. But things would not go well for Babe Parilli, this man right here, to start off the 1963 season. Because during week 2, he and his Patriots would lose 17-13 to the San Diego Chargers. Unfortunately, as you can probably guess, there's no footage of this game. But the outcome of the game itself isn't all that important, nor is how they lost all that important. What is important is one play that happened when Parilli took off and ran, and got injured in the process. Parilli suffered a pinched nerve sometime in the first half. He said he aggravated it after running one time and having a Charger hit him cleanly. You know how there are certain things you can power through, but the moment someone touches you in that spot, you start wailing in pain? That's what happened when Parilli ran with the ball in one of the rare instances that he did. And it's a big reason why he struggled in that game, as he went just 8 for 20, completing 40% of his passes for 74 yards, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and a passer rating of 11.2, which is worse if he did nothing but spike the ball into the ground on every single play. Bottom line, he did not play well that game, and the pinched nerve aggravation did not help matters at all. That's the bad news for this man that you've been watching. The good news was that he'd be back for their next game, as on Sunday, September 22nd, the Boston Patriots would be staying across the country, would be staying in California, and would be taking on the Oakland Raiders. The game that Parilli was about to play in was absolutely massive. The Patriots entered at 1-1, and back in 1963, in order to make it to the playoffs, you had to win your division. It was first place or nothing. And the last thing you wanted to do in a 14 division is drop to 1-2 to start this season off and be behind the 8 ball. Especially seeing as the previous year in 1962, neither the Houston Oilers nor the Dallas Texans, as in the 2 teams that met in the AFL Championship and made the playoffs, started the year below 500 after 3 weeks. Parilli was going to be back under center to help the Patriots get above 500 and take early control of the East. The bad news was that he was probably not going to be running. He wasn't much of a runner as it was, and it just wasn't worth it considering the fact that he wasn't fully healthy, and one shot to his passing arm to disrupt his pinched nerve would end him. But that's where this story takes a bizarre turn. Because, you see, the Patriots-Chargers game took place on Saturday, September 14th. One day later, on Sunday, September 15th, Mike Holovac would be watching football on his television set and would watch a game that would change everything and create one of the dumbest quarterback controversies ever. Because what happens when 2 future Hall of Famers at quarterback square off against each other? You get a game that is madness, and you get a game that leads to an insanely dumb idea. Anytime the New York Giants and Baltimore Colts squared off against each other back in the day, you knew that you were going to be in for a treat. You had the 1958 game, where the Colts entered undefeated, but lost it on a game-winning field goal late in the 4th quarter by Pat Summerall, with the Giants winning the game 24-21. You had the 1959 NFL Championship, which the Colts won 31-16 to win their 2nd title in franchise history. And of course, you have the 1958 NFL Championship, otherwise known as the greatest game ever played, as the Colts got revenge on the Giants for the regular season loss by winning 23-17 in the first ever overtime game in the history of the NFL, and the only one to happen before the merger. The Giants and Colts didn't play each other a lot, relatively speaking, seeing as they were in different conferences. But make no mistake about it, every time they played, it was must-see television. And that absolutely applied during this game right here on September 15th, 1963, when the Colts and Giants met at Memorial Stadium up in Baltimore in the opening game of a brand new season. In one corner, you had Johnny Unitas, a future Hall of Fame quarterback coming off of a Pro Bowl campaign the year before. In the other corner, you had Y.A. Tittle, a future Hall of Fame quarterback coming off of a Pro Bowl campaign the year before, where he was named an AP First Team All-Pro and finished second in the MVP voting behind Jim Taylor of the Green Bay Packers. Tittle led the NFL in touchdown passes in 1962, and Unitas was second. These were arguably the two best quarterbacks in the sport right now, and for the most part, everyone was watching this unfold, especially Boston Patriots head coach Mike Holovak. The game itself was another classic installment in the Giants-Colts rivalry. After the Colts jumped out to an early 21-3 lead, the Giants came storming back, with a halftime score being 28-24. To have 52 points scored in the first half of a game, especially back then in the National Football League, a league not known for offense, is incredible. In 1962, the average game in the NFL had 44 points in it, so to surpass that by a lot in one half of football was something that we just didn't see back then. This game, at times, felt like an offensive masterclass, with the Giants coming back from that 18-point deficit to win it 37-28, in a game where, somehow, no points were scored in the fourth quarter, and the Colts, after scoring 28 in the first half, did not score a single point in the second half. It was a great start for the Giants, coming off of two straight appearances in the NFL Championship in 1961 and 1962, as they were off on the right foot once again to kick off 1963. But there was one particular thing that stood out in this game in the eyes of Mike Holovak. As you might have been able to guess, it was the play of their quarterbacks, Y.A. Tittle for the New York Giants and Johnny Unitas for the Baltimore Colts. Both quarterbacks, as you can tell, were on their game on this day. Unitas went 19 for 33, completing 58% of his passes for 219 yards and 2 touchdowns, with his numbers being right in line on a per-game average with what he was doing in 1962, and well above the league-wide average. And somehow, Tittle was even better, as he had one of his greatest games ever as a pro. Tittle went 16 for 23, completing 70% of his passes for 243 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, and a passer rating of 143.7, just 15 points shy of perfection. For some idea of how good Y.A. Tittle was on this day at Memorial Stadium, of the many great games that the Hall of Famer had over his career, at the time, it was one of just 4 where he completed 70% of his passes, threw 3 touchdowns with no interceptions, and had a passer rating above 140. Would I say that this was the best game of his career? Absolutely not. Seeing as the year before, in 1962, he had a game against Washington, where he threw 7 touchdowns and no interceptions, setting the NFL record for most touchdown passes in a game. But was it one of the best games of his career, and without a doubt, the best season opener of his career? You bet. What a way to start this year off. If you watch this game between Johnny Unitas and Y.A. Tittle, you couldn't help but be amazed at how good they were at throwing the football. They were 2 of the best quarterbacks in football for a reason, and that was on full display here. However, that's not what impressed Holovak. What impressed him wasn't the time where Tittle and Unitas threw the ball, but rather the times that they ran with the ball. Because over the course of this game, Tittle and Unitas weren't just confined to dropping back and throwing it. They also took off when necessary, and they had success doing so. When the Giants took their first lead of the game in the third quarter, taking a 30-28 lead, it was after Y.A. Tittle ran it in from 9 yards out. Tittle was the furthest thing from a runner. Over his previous 5 seasons, he had under 100 yards rushing on the entire year 4 times, and he averaged less than 2 yards per carry over his entire career, with the Hall of Famer, despite playing over 200 games under center, finishing his NFL career with under 1,000 career rushing yards. But he knew how to take off and run on this day, and he even had an 11-yard run at another point in the contest. And when it came to Johnny Unitas, it was more of the same, as Unitas finished the game with 25 rushing yards, including a big 16-yard scamper at one point in the second half. No one thinks of Johnny Unitas as a running quarterback. The year before, in 1962, he literally did not have a rushing touchdown, and over the final 6 years of his career, had a grand total of 58 rushing yards. But during this game, he wasn't afraid to run when the time came. And that's when Mike Holloway, watching this game somewhere on the West Coast, with his Patriots off for the day after that loss to the Chargers, had an idea. It was an idea so stupid and so crazy that it was entirely inspired by watching one game. What if Babe Parilli was a running quarterback? I know he's not. I know there's nothing to suggest that he ever could be a running quarterback. And I know he's banged up, and the risk of running the ball isn't necessarily worth the reward due to the contact he could take. But what if that didn't matter, and what if he could run? Because after that Giants-Colts game, and after seeing how good Tittle and Unitas were, both through the air and on the ground, Mike Holloway issued a challenge to his injured, pocket-passing quarterback, who was arguably the best quarterback in the entire AFL at the time. Run the ball, or you're gone. Let's get back to the man of the hour. This man right here, Babe Parilli. He made it very clear that he was just going to be throwing the ball against the Raiders for their Week 3 showdown. Especially after having to leave the contest against the Chargers early due to his pinched nerve, he was going to be a pocket passer and a pocket passer only. Now, in theory, this shouldn't be a problem. Parilli had been doing that for his entire career thus far, and it was working perfectly. Like I said, the man was legitimately one of the best quarterbacks in football. And the previous year, in 1962, he threw 18 touchdowns on just 8 interceptions, being one of just 2 quarterbacks to throw at least 8 touchdown passes and have a positive touchdown to interception ratio. And of the 14 quarterbacks in the AFL in 1962 to throw at least 4 touchdown passes, he was the only one with a touchdown to interception ratio of 2-to-1 or greater. If Tom Brady, prior to a game against someone, came out and said that he was going to stand in the pocket, wasn't going to take off and run a lot, and was just going to throw, it's a non-story. And you're not batting your eye at it or thinking twice. That's his play style, that's how he plays the game, and it's worked well for all parties involved thus far. But apparently, this had to be a giant controversy, because Mike Holloway, the head coach of the Patriots, had other ideas, and it came after watching that Giants-Colts game. We can do better at quarterback than Babe Parilli. If he can't run the ball, he's useless. Because that's when Holloway went to the press, publicly condemned his quarterback's comments, and said that Parilli was going to be running with the ball against the Raiders. As he said, quite bluntly, the Babe will run. You didn't think Babe Parilli was a running quarterback? You didn't think you could teach an old dog new tricks? Think again, because Babe is going to be taking off. As Holloway said, look at Y.A. Tittle of the New York Giants and Johnny Unitas of Baltimore. They ran last Sunday and accomplished a lot. The Babe will run. And I love that logic by Holloway. Just because other quarterbacks did something means that our quarterback, who is playing well by his own merit, has to do the same thing. It's like if I've got a great pitcher on my baseball team who doesn't exactly have the greatest fastball in the world. It tops out at 95. But he throws a mean off-speed pitch, and it fools everyone to the point where he's one of the best pitchers in the game. Then, you see a game where someone's throwing 100 miles an hour on every fastball, and you say that your pitcher is going to have to learn how to throw like that, because that one guy had success, completely discounting the other pitchers who try to throw like that and fail and aren't that good, and completely discounting your own pitcher's success with the off-speed pitch. But what makes this even more insane is the further justification behind this. Because the reason why Babe Parilli had to run was because too many running backs were injured. Seriously. As Holloway said, we cannot afford a quarterback who passes only. It would be nice to afford that luxury, but we can't in this league. We only carry 33 players, and halfbacks Ron Burden, Al Snyder, and Tom Newman are all out injured. So let me get this straight. Because your running backs are injured, you can't afford to have your quarterback just be a pocket passer? You need your quarterback to run because your running backs are hurt? That's an entirely different position! That's an entirely freaking different position! That's like me saying that for as great of a pass rusher as Bruce Smith is, the Bills have too many defensive backs injured, so we can't afford to have a pass rusher who only rushes the quarterback. And we need to have defensive ends who can drop into coverage. That's like me saying that for as great of a point guard as Tyrese Halliburton is for the Indiana Pacers, we have too many centers who are injured, so we can't afford to have a point guard who only plays guard. And we need to have point guards who can play center. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. Are you going to line Babe Parilli up at running back or something? I promise you, it's not going to go the way you think it will. You need your quarterback to run with the ball because you saw Tittle and Unitas do it one time, and because your running backs are injured despite playing a completely different position. May I remind you that the head coach in all of this, Mike Holloway, in talking about the man you've been watching this entire time, in Babe Parilli, was a highly successful coach, and as a case for being the most successful head coach in Patriots history before Bill Belichick got there. He won 52 games with the team across 8 seasons, had a winning record in each of his first 4 seasons with the organization, and was the man in charge of one of the most consistent teams in football across that time frame. And apparently, he was a certified moron. Who are the guys that were worse than him? I'm just trying to imagine Kevin Stefanski before a game for the Cleveland Browns saying, I know Joe Flacco's been playing well as of late, but we need Joe Flacco to run with the ball because all of our running backs are hurt. And if Flacco can't run with the ball, we're going to find someone who can. You wouldn't hear that because that doesn't make sense. Yet apparently, in the mind of Mike Holloway, everything was adding up somehow for reasons beyond my comprehension. Oh, and if you thought that was crazy, don't you worry. It gets worse. Because in emphasizing once again that the Babe will run, Holloway took time to criticize his quarterback further, saying that the offensive success of the Patriots had nothing to do with their quarterback. He said that of the 51 points that the Patriots scored 2 games into the season, that just 6 of them came through the air. Therefore, the quarterback wasn't all that important. You could put just about anyone back there a quarterback, and they do the job, because it's all about running the football. And there's a few crazy things with that statement that also need to be broken down, because at this point, I'm losing my mind and my sanity over something that happened more than 6 decades ago. Number one with that, 51 points scored through the first 2 games of the season is quite literally the number 1 total in your division, and by a country mile, I might add. The next best team in the East through 2 weeks was the Houston Oilers at 33 points. Not only was it the best total in the division, but it was just 8 points off the league lead. You're criticizing your offense and criticizing the signal caller in this, when the signal caller is the one calling the plays and calling the shots, and when the offense is playing really well, you're criticizing this man right here for running a good offense? Number 2, even if a team scores a lot of their points on the ground, how do you think they're getting in that spot? How do you think they're getting in position to score on the run? It's because their quarterback is playing well enough where defenses can't stack the box and have to respect the pass. If a quarterback takes a team 98 yards down the field and the running back takes the final play in for a touchdown, that doesn't mean that the quarterback did nothing on the drive. The quarterback played a huge role in that. If a baseball player is batting the leadoff spot and doesn't drive in any runs during the game, but he gets on board and scores runs because someone else brings him in, that doesn't mean that the leadoff batter was ineffective. That means that the leadoff batter, quite literally, did his job. He got the offense going in a rhythm. He set the tempo and the tone, and then someone else did their job when it mattered most. Criticizing Babe Parilli for running a good offense, especially when back then quarterbacks mainly ran their own offense, is nonsensical. And to emphasize this point even more, let's go back to that 1961 season, when Babe Parilli was one of the best quarterbacks in football and led the AFL in completion percentage and in fourth quarter comebacks. In 1961, the Patriots have the second best offense in football from a points scored standpoint, scoring 29.5 points per game. The only team that was better than them in that category was the Houston Oilers, who were in a completely different stratosphere at 36.6 points per game and were untouchable on that side of the ball. In 1961, the Patriots won 9 games and won each of their final 4 games to close off the season. In 1961, the Patriots finished second in the entire league in yards per carry, averaging 4.3 yards per gain on the ground, which was number 1 in their division and was only behind the Dallas Texans for the top total in the American Football League. And during this successful season of theirs, where they had one of the best offenses in football, had one of the best rushing attacks in football, and were one of just 3 teams to finish the season above 500, there were 7 games where Babe Parilli ran for at least 10 yards, and 7 games where he ran for less than that. It was split right down the middle in terms of games where he had at least double-digit rushing yards and games where he was stuck at 0 or in the single digits. Perfectly balanced as all things should be. Guess when the Patriots won more games and had the better winning percentage? It was when Parilli had single-digit rushing yards, as the Pats won 5 of their 7 games where he was held to under 10 yards on the ground, but won 4 of their 7 games where he had more than that. This is all to say that this idea that Babe Parilli needed to run the ball more because of something about offensive statistics was complete nonsense and complete bull. You didn't need Babe Parilli to run the ball to win games. That had been proven time and time again, and Hollavac saw it firsthand during that 1961 season as the head coach of this team. You want to play the stats game? I'll play the stats game and show you just how stupid you're being. And number 3, I mentioned that Babe Parilli had to run the ball because the Patriots were limited with roster space, and a lot of their running backs were injured. Hollavac said that Ron Burden, Al Snyder, and Tom Newman were all out with injuries. So the Patriots had to have a quarterback running with the football, and had to have this man right here take off and run. Well, guess what? During the first game of the season, a game where the Patriots dominated offensively against the New York Titans and won by a final score of 38-14, guess how many carries Burden, Snyder, and Newman had combined? Go on, take a guess. That's right, 0, zilch, nada, none. None of the guys that Hollavac mentioned ran with the ball in week 1 when the Patriots dropped 38. And Babe Parilli only ran with the ball twice that game. And yet, they were still fine. The offense was clicking perfectly. So nothing about Mike Hollavac's logic made any sense. I truly mean it. Nothing here makes any sense. It's like saying that the New York Giants needed Eli Manning to run with the football because Tiki Barber was out with an injury. Yet the last game, Manning didn't run with it once, and the Giants won convincingly and scored 41 points, with Manning playing well. Mike Holloway's brain was mush. I don't know whether it was from watching the game between the Colts and the Giants, staying out on the West Coast, or a combination of a bunch of things. But there were so many holes in his argument that it doesn't even qualify as Swiss cheese anymore. For everything that Holloway said in emphasizing that Babe Parilli was going to be running with the ball, or else he was not going to be quarterbacking the team, there are at least 5 flaws you can point out that make no sense. There have been plenty of reasons why quarterbacks have been put on blast by their coaches. Plenty of reasons. But this might be the dumbest one, and I do not say that lightly. Throwing, quite possibly, the best quarterback in the AFL under the bus for this, and implying that he won't be quarterbacking your team for much longer if he doesn't completely change its play style? I've run out of words for it at this point. That's how asinine this is. Which is why it might come as no surprise to you how the game against the Raiders turned out. With all of that now taken care of, we can finally talk about what happened during Week 3 against the Oakland Raiders. With a backdrop of this game, and with the headlines for this one being the world's dumbest quarterback controversy that was manufactured out of nothing. The question for this one wasn't just about whether the Raiders or Patriots would win. The question was also about how short of a leash Babe Parilli was on, and how often he would run with the ball so as not to upset his delusional, brain-dead coach, who seemingly had no idea how football worked. Now, the good news for the Patriots was that they won the game by a final score of 20-14, scoring the first 20 points of the contest, leading at 17-0 at the halftime break, and never looking back, leading it wire to wire. Despite a shaky fourth quarter for the defense, as Tom Flores came off the bench and threw 2 touchdown passes late to make the game close, the Patriots prevailed. Defensively, for the most part, Boston played an exceptional game, as they held the Raiders to just 24 yards rushing. Oakland was a solid team during that 1963 season when it came to running with the football, as the Raiders finished the year with the second best yards per carry average in football, only being bested by the San Diego Chargers, one of the greatest rushing attacks of all time, who were in a different stratosphere when it came to running with the ball compared to the other teams in the league. But 24 yards on this day? That's really bad. And it was so bad that at that point in franchise history, it was the second lowest rushing total all time for Oakland, only better than their game against the San Diego Chargers on October 22nd, 1961, when in a 41-10 defeat, they had just 2 rushing yards. And the Patriots did a very good job containing Conan Davidson at quarterback, as before he was replaced by Flores, Davidson went just 5 for 17, completing 29% of his passes for 7 net passing yards, 0 touchdowns, 1 interception, and a passer rating of 18, which is worse than he did nothing but spike the ball into the ground on every single play. The Patriots offensive line got 10 sacks on this day, absolutely destroying Oakland up front. It really felt as though nothing went right for the Raiders on this day. When you lose 100 yards in sacks, that says a lot. But what about Babe Parilli? What about the Patriots quarterback? Well, you might notice something when you watch these highlights of Parilli from this game, and that was his lack of running. Turns out, you don't need to run to be a successful quarterback and engineer a successful offense. Who knew? Who knew that playing the exact same way that you always played when you were playing well was good enough? Parilli threw a touchdown pass in the first quarter, getting the scoring started with a 55-yarder to Billy Lott. And the Patriots had other guys not named Parilli to run with the football, as the Patriots picked up 160 rushing yards, despite the fact that Parilli had 1 carry for 3 yards on the day. He disobeyed his coach. And I guess after the game, Holloway learned his lesson, even if he tried to deny ever saying those comments that he made before the game. because in the days after the game, Holloway said on his quarterback, "I've always said that a sound Parilli is all we need. He's as good as they come, and when he's right, our offense really moves." This is good news from him. I mean, that doesn't sound like what you've always said. That sounds like the exact opposite of what you said prior to the game, actually. How I've always said that a sound Parilli is all we need, and Parilli needs to run with the ball more, or else he's going to be replaced, and I wish he played like Y.A. Tittle and Johnny Unitas, or anywhere close to the same, beats me. Maybe Holloway struggled with English, or was reading a counterfeit dictionary. Either way, Parilli, after that outing against the Raiders, where he was just himself, played at a high level, and did nothing different, even despite his coach wanting otherwise, would carry that momentum with him through the rest of the 1963 season, as Parilli would guide the Boston Patriots to their first AFL championship appearance in franchise history, where they would lose to the Chargers. Parilli finished that season as a Pro Bowler after finishing the year 5th in the league in passing yards. I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that during that 1963 season, Parilli actually averaged more yards per run in losing efforts versus winning efforts. And of the 14 games that the Patriots played in the regular season, they won 7 of them, with Parilli running for fewer yards across the 7 wins than across the 7 games that they did not win, which was 6 losses and a tie. In actuality, the Patriots were a better team in 1963 when Parilli was not running with the football. If that's not irony, then I don't know what is. Someone get Alanis Morissette on line 1. So what's the moral of the story involving this man right here in Babe Parilli? Turns out, the Babe doesn't need to run. If a quarterback is really good, so what if he can't do one thing? If it doesn't impede him, so what? If you're winning games, so what? If he's playing well, so what? Not everyone can be great at everything. And to try and force someone to be great at something when it was never going to happen, and when that player was one of the best anyways, seems nonsensical. Mike Holloway created a quarterback controversy out of nothing. Literally nothing. He put his quarterback on blast for having the audacity to be a quarterback, and a darn good and successful one at that. Babe Parilli was not a runner. In his 15 seasons in the NFL and the AFL combined, across 189 games, the man had just a hair over 1,500 career rushing yards, for an average of 8 per game. But he made it work, as most quarterbacks did during that time. Again, it's only recent that we've seen quarterbacks really take off with the ball. This was the expectation back then for quarterbacks to just stand back there and throw. And Babe Parilli was one of the best in the game at doing that. I guess the lesson in this is that putting a fish on blast for being unable to climb a tree when that fish is faster than every other fish in the sea is really stupid. Because no, Mike Holloway, the Babe won't run, but the Babe will throw, and he'll throw it darn well. Check out our live streaming schedule for the next few days. We're live every single day on this channel, whether we're covering a sporting event or playing GeoGuessr or just taking your requests. So make sure you like and subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single time that we go live and so that you can join this community. Also, thanks to all our members and our Patreon supporters who get exclusive perks like their name at the end of each video, members-only Q&A streams, and cool emojis to use on videos and during streams. See how you can join this community and become a member or a Patreon member by clicking the link in the description below.